B had enough. The defense just said that. Had enough. She did have enough. On September 27th, 2020, she had enough. She took out a .45 caliber gun and shot Mr. Benefield 4 times. At Mr. Benefield 4 times. And why did she do that? Why had she had enough? I will do anything I have to do to keep my baby. Asshole. To a detective that she demanded arrest somebody in a courthouse because that will help her keep her baby. It is not surprising at all that Detective Gillum remembered that. That is an outrageous statement to say to a law enforcement officer. You will arrest him or I will make you. That's what she told a law enforcement officer. You think she'll tell a law enforcement officer that and she won't shoot Doug Benefield when she's had enough? No, she would and she did. Time is running out. Within a week of murdering Mr. Benefield, time is running out. She said that. I will take matters into my own hands. She said that to a psychologist who was doing reports for the state, for the court. I will take matters into my own hands. And she did, with 45. And let's talk about what we've heard, and it's my job to rebut the defense's argument. That's what I'm here for. And I think we can. And I do ask you to depend on your memory. But I want to set some groundworks. Number one, Ms. O'Donnell and I are clearly part of an old boy network. This is not an old boy network. This is law. This is the law. And if those law enforcement officers did not find that they had the sufficient basis to arrest Mr. Benefield, then they wouldn't have. And that's why they did it. That is not an old boy network. That is how our country works. That is what the law is for. Otherwise, any woman could walk into any police station and say, my husband did X, Y, Z, and they're just going to arrest him? No. It requires evidence. It's the same reason that law enforcement took a long time between this murder and her arrest. They were investigating it. They were making sure they had everything they needed to have. And when they did, they effectuated an arrest. And the prosecution, you heard a lot. You heard Ms. O'Donnell's name more than Ashley Benefield's name during that closing. It's not about Ms. O'Donnell. It's not about Ms. Friel. It's not about either of us. It's the state of Florida, and we have the burden. And we've overcome it. It's not a flawed prosecution. Our job is to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that the elements in this case occurred, that manslaughter occurred, which it did. Manslaughter is an intentional act that caused a death. She intentionally shot him, and he died. That's a manslaughter, no doubt about it. But that's not enough. She did it because she has ill will, hatred, spite, or evil intent. She had a depraved heart when she shot and killed Mr. Benefield so she could keep her baby. And does it matter if the report was coming out or if that injunction hearing was happening? No. Clearly, Miss Murphy and her client, who was murdered just a few days later, thought that Mr. Broder's report was coming out. Clearly, Faith Brown and Ashley Benefield thought or knew that they were having an injunction hearing on that day. The jig is up. She has wanted this man out of her life. She has wanted her baby to herself. And what is she doing? She's so scared of him, she has him doing her manual labor. You can come over. You can move my stuff. You can get the heavy stuff. You know what? Can you stop and buy me boxes? Can you stop and buy me tape? Do you want to go to the gardens? She told you that she couldn't dress a certain way. She was in a sports bra and shorts when he showed up. You didn't hear that he said a word. You didn't hear that he had insulted her in any way. She would have you believe all these things about Mr. Benefield. And mind you, Mr. Benefield is not on trial. Ashley Benefield's on trial. Ashley Benefield's the one that committed a criminal act on 9/27, 2020, when she murdered him. Don't be confused or distracted by emails and questions that showed you nothing. The question is, were the facts, did you learn whether or not she shot him and at the time she had a depraved heart? And there was no dishonesty by Stephanie Murphy. Don't be confused by that. I think they just had a different understanding of what was going to happen. There's certainly no dishonesty by Detective Gillum. Not remembering something, or Detective Warren, and being dishonest are two wholly different things. And nobody's expected to remember everything. The question for you, as Ms. O'Donnell said, is whether or not it was reasonable and necessary for her to kill him, for her to shoot him that day when he's in a shorts and a t-shirt and flip-flops doing her work for her. And keep in mind, this ninja we've heard of, 5'9", 169, adult small t-shirt. adult small t-shirt, size 30 waist. We know what that means. This is not a huge man. This is not a hulking beast of a man. And the state is not contending that he didn't make mistakes. He certainly did. One of the biggest being trying to maintain this relationship and in his death. It wasn't reasonable. Never hit her. She said he never hit her. He did some outrageous things, but never hit her in any sort, way, shape, or form. In 3 years they'd been apart. 3 years. Reasonable. Is it reasonable? She would have you believe that, and look at those text messages. Look at the text messages going into that week, that whole week. And look at, I would ask you to read the state's version because that is the complete conversation. Oh, I'm sorry, those are the older text messages. When you look at the older text messages, this murderous intent, he's talking about her old boyfriends. She admitted that. And them choking her during sex. He's not talking about wanting to go out in the world and murder people. He's certainly not talking about her. It may not be what the average person thinks of a way to express your love, but apparently to Doug Benefield and to her, it was. Because she's like, I know, baby. Don't talk like that. She never checks him, right? She never says, oh, don't. She says, I think she says, it was just a fight. These men that were just talking, she says it's a fight. So don't be confused. Look at the evidence. But in the text messages leading up to that week, look at them. You have them. They're the ones Ms. O'Donnell did that had the video of them playing a game at Panera where they're all yucking it up. I would dispute that she was afraid. I would dispute most of what Mr. Ferris said, but we'll come back to that. So she would have you believe that this man who has never struck her, who in 3 years she reports no abuse. 3 years. He's done nothing. She left him while pregnant, did not tell him that she birthed his baby, did not give that baby his name, and then files before he ever meets his child to terminate his parental rights. And allegations that he insulted her, came to her house and hit her, did any of those things. Shot any guns, had any guns, none of that. Right? So she did all those horrible things. If you want your baby, those are horrible. Doug Benefield. She did all those things, nothing happens. But this day, when she has been dictating for a week when he could come over, when he could help her, what they would do, she would have you believe that he got so enraged because she was done moving and she was tired that he hit her for the first time ever. And you get to decide if you believe her or not. I would submit to you that did not happen. There's no evidence of it, and you know it. You can see by those pictures. I don't care what Barbara Russell, who's clearly biased, right? Barbara Russell is a clearly biased witness. That's her. They have some kind of relationship that is clearly not professional. And she sat there and told you that she saw swelling. Keep in mind, she saw her the night of. This is her. This is somebody who she had a professional relationship with and then moved in. The night of, that's who comes to her, this woman. She tells you that she has edema on her face. I don't know what edema is. I assume it's swelling and bruising. It's not there. You can see in those pictures. You're going to look at them. You can look at them till the cows come home. You won't see swelling. All those law enforcement officers who are trained to look for that, crime scene techs who went there for the sole purpose of finding injuries, and had some lawyer pointing out that her ear was red. Look at that picture. There's no redness. No redness. So he becomes so enraged that he hits her for the first time. She doesn't go down. She didn't say, I fell. This man is a trained fighter who's a ninja, and he hits her, and she doesn't go down. And she can't tell you if it was a slap or a punch. There's a big difference. There's a big difference. And if he punched her in the eye, her eye would look way different than it does. There's no swelling on the side from a punch. She'd have a black eye, not a bruise, not a swell, nothing. So let's say it was a slap. Let's believe her. It was a slap. There's no redness, no swelling, no bruising, no scratching, no evidence in the photos. I mean, if somebody slaps somebody in the face, there's a red mark. Nothing. Within minutes. And even if you don't believe law enforcement, which I submit there's no reason to not believe them, Mr. Sand, that sweet old man, who she brought this drama into his home, said, I didn't see any injuries. Wouldn't he be the one in the best position to see if she had been slapped in the face moments before? Certainly. He didn't see it because it wasn't there. It's an attempt to manipulate the system, which is exactly what she continues to do. And keep in mind, he's flipped out to the point of hitting her for the first time because she's tired and doesn't want to move anymore. That's what she told you. She didn't say she had tried to break up with him. She didn't say she had told him she didn't want to see him again. She didn't say any of those things. She told him she didn't want to live together when they were alone together, and it was fine. It was fine. So he gets so enraged and pops off and hits her or punches her in the face when she's tired, but not when she says she doesn't want to be with him. Is that reasonable? It is not. And I'm trying to think of a way to say this nicely, but I would submit to you that everything that Dr. Quintal said about Doug Benefield was basically Dr. Quintal talking with Ashley Benefield's voice. She's a manipulator. She manipulated him the same way she tried to manipulate everyone else in the world. He said he met with them 9 times, and Ashley Benefield was present for 7 of them and alone for 5 of them. So every bit of information he got, except for 2 sessions, comes through the voice of Ashley Benefield, the way she wants him to think things are, right? He's very controlling. He's very alpha male, which is apparently a bad thing now. He's super controlling. He's jealous. Keeping in mind, she's the one that asked Doug Benefield, are you dating her now? When he's there with her lawyer. But Doug Benefield's the one that's super jealous. And what did he tell you? Other than he thought all those things he conceded that they were all based on what Ashley told him. Not based on anything he observed. He conceded that, which I appreciate. But the weird thing was that he had this weird encounter where he thought that Doug didn't want to see the child. And what did he say? I saw him for a few minutes in my waiting room. I went into a session for an hour. And then I saw him for a few more minutes, and then we started their session. So what happened in that hour? Dr. Quintal doesn't know. For him to make any assumptions on what the relationship was between Doug Benefield and his child based on seeing him for those few minutes is not reasonable. There was no basis for that. And keep in mind, through all of that she's dictating when Doug can see that baby. We don't know if he knew she was out there. He's sitting in the lobby of a psychologist or a therapist's office. We don't know that he knew she was out here. There's so many assumptions that Dr. Quintal jumped to in order to say those things, and they're just not reasonable. Despite a court order, she's dictating when Doug sees that baby and how, and that you're supposed to believe that it was something weird about Doug that he didn't go out to the parking lot. He could have been in the parking lot for an hour for all Dr. Quintal knows. And but the one thing he did say that was interesting was Ashley said she was frustrated with the system. Which sounds familiar. Time is running out. I'll take things into my own hands. I'll do anything I have to do. She's frustrated because she's trying and trying and trying to do these things based on things that are not happening or not true, and it's not going her way. She tried to terminate his parental rights. Judge said, he can see that baby. That 6-month-old that he's never seen. So what did she do? Well, I don't really want him to do that, so I'm going to dictate how he sees the baby. Now I'm going to be sweet again. Now I'm going to go back. I think the only person that was in a cycle was Ashley Benefield. I'm not going to talk to you for months, but once somebody says you can have my baby, now I'm your best friend again. That's not Doug Benefield. He acted the same way in those text messages as she told you he did for 3 years. No violence, no threats, no manipulation, no emotional abuse. And that brings me to Dr. Ferris. Mr. Ferris. Mr. Ferris has never seen a relationship he wouldn't say is a domestic violence relationship. He would not concede anything. On direct, Mr. Taylor was giving him hypotheticals that had 6 or 8 aspects to them. And he was able to just answer. Oh yeah, sure, that's domestic. Goes right on the wheel. I'm asking him simple questions, and everything he would not concede. The only one he conceded about was that if she was living on her own, he couldn't have been economically controlling her. But how do you not concede that one, right? That's common sense. Every other thing he refused to concede. And this is one thing I will agree with Mr. Taylor. We have different perceptions because I think Dr. Ferris was clearly biased based on his inability to answer my questions when he clearly could answer the defense questions. It's clear from what was happening in this relationship that Ashley Benefield was not a victim of domestic violence. Doug Benefield's the victim in this case, not Ashley Benefield. And that there was not this power and control wheel Doug Benefield was on. And keep in mind, Mr. Ferris would have you believe that somebody could be violent and then never be not violent again. That's what he said. I said, are you telling me that once there's violence in someone, it can never be changed? Well, if that's true, why does he teach CBIP? He makes his money on CBIP, right? Certified Battery Intervention Program. If what he told me was true, he's wasting people's time because he doesn't believe anybody can get better. And we all know that's not true. People change. People learn. People realize what they've done. People apologize for what they've done. And while saying the words is not enough, 3 years of not being any way violent or threatening or abusive, that's an indication that Mr. Benefield was trying to change. He was trying to do anything he could to be with his wife and to be with his baby. And Mr. Taylor kept saying, the defense kept saying trauma. She was so traumatized by this gunshot in the ceiling. So she had a baby with him? She testified to you that that happened before they reversed, or around the same time they reversed his vasectomy. That's a big deal. That's a decision. That's not it. I think Mr. Taylor said, you found yourself pregnant. She didn't find herself pregnant. She planned to have a baby. They planned it together. They went through medical procedures to do it, and they did it. All the while, she's so traumatized. I would submit to you that is not the case. She wanted a baby, and she got one. But Doug was in the way. As to that neighbor thing, it wasn't Mr. Sant. I don't know where that came from. There was no allegation it was ever Mr. Sant. It was some neighbor across the street, and Ms. O'Donnell told you exactly what was in evidence. Somebody across the street saw some man in her backyard wearing a baseball cap, and clearly that must be Doug Benefield looking in Ashley Benefield's windows. That's ridiculous. That's a jump you cannot make. That man could have been looking for his dog. We have no idea. There's certainly no evidence he was looking at anybody's windows other than the defense counsel saying that. And even if he was, does not make it reasonable and necessary to shoot him. It is not a basis that would cause you to believe he's going to kill you. Going to kill you. Not a basis. I would submit to you he never was in that yard. He was never looking in the windows. But even if he was, tracker, not a basis to believe he's going to kill you, if that even happened. The house. Buying the house, I read that very differently. First of all, he wasn't trying to buy, he was trying to rent. And if you don't believe that they were talking while they had this mutual injunction, they were, I'm sure. Ms. Benefield was lying to him, telling him they're going to move to Maryland and live in separate houses, but co-parent. And she was all the while planning with her attorney to have an injunction hearing in a matter of days. It's reasonable to believe that mutual injunction was, I'm sure, Ms. Benefield was speaking to him when it was convenient for her. She could get something out of it. Only goes with the rest of it. This letter we've heard about, that Ms. Benefield testified all these things, it's another effort at manipulation. We don't know when she wrote that letter. We don't know what she put in it. We don't know if any of it was true. I can write a letter and tell you that I'm the Queen of England. It doesn't make it true. And just because I say I wrote it 3 years ago doesn't mean I did. I keep saying manipulation. And the reason is because this defendant attempted to manipulate the system. It didn't work. She attempted to manipulate the experts. She kind of did, right? Because what did we hear about Dr. Liu and Mr. Haig? They talked to the defendant. She told him what she says happened, right? I don't even think she told him the same story she told you based on what they said. But what do we know? So Mr. Haig, I will submit to you, I think Mr. Haig was great. I loved it. I thought he was very interesting. I thought he shed a lot of light on how this murder occurred, right? And I would submit to you that you should believe him over Dr. Liu when it comes to trajectory. He's an expert, no doubt about it. That's what he does all the time. Dr. Liu, the medical examiner, she seems like a well-qualified medical examiner who did testify mostly for the state because she worked for the state and is now testifying for the defense. And the defense asked you, why would she do that? She did that because she's getting paid. She's paid to be here. That's why she's here. That's why she's saying those things. And most of them are probably very accurate. So Mr. Haig tells you there's 4 shots. We know that, right? We had 4 casings. We have 4 projectiles. One is in Mr. Benefield's chest or back. And I think there was some misunderstanding of what Ms. O'Donnell was trying to. What she's trying to show you is that if it was from the front, because say I'm lunging, it would go in my chest and out the back. That's not what happened. It went front to back because it hit him here and came out here. Well, that's front to back. That's not front to back like it goes in my chest and comes out my back. That's front to back because it didn't end up here, right? Or she didn't shoot him in the back, it ended up on the other side of his back. It goes across his body, destroying his lungs, destroying his spinal cord, damaging his ribs. And what did Dr. Liu say? He dropped. He dropped. I think that's important. So Mr. Haig said there's one bullet, right? We got 4. One is in his chest, so we know where that one is. One's in the living room wall that Mr. Haig said he believed was going down and struck the tile and then bounced up and hit the wall. He knows better than me. Seems reasonable. 3 is in the wall, number 7. Perfectly round, typical gunshot. Nothing in its path, because what did he say? If something was in his path, it would begin to tumble. It wouldn't be that perfect hole that we picture as a gunshot in a wall or target or anything else. And then through his leg. So which bullet hit his arm? I think Dr. Liu might have been correct when she had that young man laying on the floor. It probably went through his leg when he was on the floor, because Ashley Benefield told you something. She said, she's shooting down. We know that's not true, right? Because his chest is way up here. His chest isn't down here. But she told you that I had stopped shooting when he fell. That's also, I think, untrue. Dr. Liu told you he would have dropped. So he's paralyzed, laying on the ground, and she continues to shoot at him. Otherwise, if you believe that she's moving from left to right to get away from him, he's dancing around dodging bullets? I mean, they would have you believe this is a very tight room. I don't know how tight it is, but you can see there's either a full or a queen-size mattress in that room, and there's plenty of other room. This is not a room closet. This is a full-size bedroom. What else do we know? Dr. Vega said that they had been at least 3 feet apart. 3 feet apart. Uncontroverted. Nobody said anything different. Except for our firearms guy, but said he looked chemically at the shirt and found nothing. 6 to 7 feet. 6 to 7 feet. Even if we go 3 feet, you have to keep in mind, that's from the end of the gun. She is pointing a gun at him. Here to Mr. Benefield is at least 3 feet, if not 6 to 7, when she hits him in the chest. At least 3 feet when she hits him on the leg, because Dr. Vega said there was no stippling on the leg. They're not in close combat. We keep hearing about this. They are not in close combat. They're a whole grown-sized man apart, 6 feet, from the end of her gun to his body. And we know that. That's from the science. That was uncontroverted. You heard nothing to question that. You can take that one to the bank. And I would submit to you that those 2 experts, Mr. Haig was the one you should be depending on, even though he also spoke to Ms. Benefield, so clearly got one side of the story, or a made-up story. And that Dr. Liu is not the expert that Mr. Haig is on trajectory. So if you go in the back and you're curious about the trajectory, I would say you should depend on Dr. Vega's testimony about how the bullets entered the body and exited, which Dr. Liu did not contest. And as for the other bullets, you should depend on Mr. Haig, because he's clearly more suited to answer those questions. As to Detective Warren, poor Detective Warren, who gets called just to be impeached, said he had opinions. You know whose opinions don't matter in this case? Detective Warren's. Mine don't matter, Ms. O'Donnell's don't matter, state attorneys don't matter. It's your opinions that matter. It's when you go in the back and you listen to the facts and evidence in this case, and you decide if we've proven our case. If Detective Warren, at the time in which he made his decisions, thought that he was shot in the back, that's not wholly unreasonable. He may have been mistaken. It doesn't make his opinion invalid, but what it does, it's not relevant to your decision making, because you're depending on the facts, and you have the accurate facts.
10 minutes.
Thank you, Judge. I appreciate that. And that whole bias business, Detective Warren explained what that is. That's sexual bias or racial bias. This wasn't a hate crime. This wasn't a crime because somebody hates somebody else because of their sexual orientation. That's not what this is. That's not a place to put ill will, hatred, spite, or evil intent. Ill will, hate, spite, or evil intent is not bias. It's an element of second-degree murder. It's a depraved heart. And that's what Ashley Benefield had when she murdered Doug Benefield. 2 more things, and then I want to talk to you lastly about the reasonable doubt. As to Dr. Broder, I think you should take some of what Dr. Broder said to heart. His concern, her concern, was not that Doug was going to fly off at the handle. She said she was concerned she would make him look bad in front of Dr. Broder. I pretended that I'm moving to Maryland and going to co-parent because I don't want to make him look bad. This man that I would have you believe was a abusive, horrible man. They have defamed him up and down. No, she didn't say that. She didn't say, I was afraid that Doug would freak out on me. I was afraid he'd do this. No, she said, I didn't want to make him look bad. She's manipulating Dr. Broder, right? She's manipulating Doug for sure. She can't say in front of Doug, I'm not moving to Maryland, because then who's going to move her boxes, right? I can't say in front of Doug, I'm not moving to Maryland with you, because then maybe he won't drop his divorce case. Then maybe he'll try to take my baby, right? She can't let him know that. She can't let him know that till he's packed her up, ready to go. It's manipulation. And that's what she does. That's what she's done. The evidence has shown it to you. It doesn't matter if it was the report or the injunction. She knew the jig is up. He might seek more control. It probably just went in there, but Stephanie Murphy told you that when they went and she was trying to get an injunction and it was denied, and he was trying to get custody, visitation, see his baby for the first time. She said something I thought was very telling. The judge gave Doug sole medical control, or primary medical control over the baby, right? So now he's already got some control. She can't do anything without him on the medical stuff, right? Of course she's worried. Of course, because she wants that baby, and she'll do whatever she can do to keep it, her. And I wouldn't put anything in the fact that she didn't confess on her phone, that she didn't tell somebody that she had shot him one way or the other. She didn't even tell her mama. Her mother would have you believe that in all these years, she's never said something to you. You think she's going to put it on her phone? No, she's smarter than that. If that's true, she's certainly not going to put it on her phone. And just because you search up how to co-parent with an abuser doesn't mean that person's an abuser. I would submit to you that Ashley Benefield is very smart. She's been working the system or trying for years. If I say, oh, I'm trying to co-parent with an abuser, that looks good for me. He's an abuser. He shouldn't have my baby. He shouldn't have medical control. He certainly shouldn't have custody, partial custody, or anything else. Just because she said it doesn't mean it's true. And that's because, as I said, she tried to manipulate the system in South Carolina. It ended up being mutual. She tried to manipulate the system in Florida. She got turned down. She tried to terminate his parental rights. The judge gave him custody. She tried to manipulate the experts, as I already talked, and I think in some cases she did. And she's trying to manipulate you. You can decide what you think about her testimony. She's a witness like any other. But I would submit to you that that was all manipulation. There were no tears. You use your common sense. If you cry and have to take breaks and you're racking, then you're going to have a swollen face. Your eyes are going to be puffy. You're going to have snot. I don't know what other word to use. She didn't even get a tissue until I can't remember who, either the judge or the defense attorney told her, hey, there's tissues. Oh, yeah, I should have a tissue. She'd been crying for 15 minutes. Didn't need a tissue. That's manipulation. That's her efforts to manipulate you to make you believe that she was a victim. She is not the victim. Douglas Benefield was the victim in this case. And reasonable doubt, I would ask you to read your instructions because that board they put up was an incomplete instruction. It left out parts. And the part is that proof beyond a reasonable doubt does not mean proof beyond all doubt. You don't have to get back there and have no doubt. You have to get back there and decide, did she shoot and kill him with a depraved heart? And I would submit to you she did. And then you have to decide, was she justified in using self-defense? Was it reasonable and necessary based on what happened in that house that she shoot and kill him on September 27th, 2020? It's not a mere possible doubt, a speculative, imaginary, or forced doubt. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a reasonable doubt. And the state would submit to you that we have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Doug Benefield is dead. The death was caused by a criminal act of this defendant, Ashley Benefield, and there was an unlawful killing by an act imminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a depraved mind without regard for human life. And it was not justified. It was not based on self-defense. It was not reasonable and necessary to stand 6 to 7 feet away from that man and shoot at him 4 times. And I would ask that you come back and find this defendant guilty of murder in the 2nd degree with a firearm. Thank you. Thank you, Judge.
All right.